But I want to tell you at the beginning of the show, I got to look at the rundown here. We've got Michael Shear coming up a little bit later. We got, of course, Dr. Larry Arnn today. New Congresswoman Hinson from Iowa is going to join us, Sunny Bunch. So let me take a couple of minutes here and in the next segment to tell you this. I spent 3.5 hours at a hearing yesterday on LA Skid Row. Now, a week ago, Sunday, a federal judge who I know, David Carter, issued an order to show cause, which I immediately sent to my friends in the media because it's just so remarkable. It's an order to show cause why the federal court ought not to take over LA City and LA County housing programs. This is billions of dollars of stuff. And it's because there's civil rights suit was filed in March of last year, and I hadn't really read it or paid much attention to it because there are lots of civil rights suits filed all over the country. Until this order comes along from an old friend of mine, David Carter, veteran and hero of Khe Sanh, Vietnam vet, about 76 years old, great judge. I've been thrown out of his court, and I thought I had a pretty good argument, but he did not. So I get along well with Judge Carter. I've known him forever. And he is very blunt, very careful, very smart federal judge, very tough. And when he issues an order to show cause why he ought not to take over LA City and LA County housing, I sit up and I read it, and he's citing correctly Brown v. Board and Plata, which are two big Supreme Court cases that where federal courts just basically use whatever power they want. Something called structural equitable relief. Never see it. Now, I teach con law, and I've been teaching con law for 25 years. People ask me, what the hell are you doing up here? Because I don't live in L.A. I live in Virginia now, and I'm in L.A. I'm in Orange County for a couple of months. But I saw this order, so I wanted to go and ask the judge to connect me with a Sherpa. So he connected me with Reverend Andy Bales, who runs the Union Rescue Mission. And yesterday morning after the show, now the show is on 6 to 9 a.m. on the East Coast. It's an East Coast drive show with 400 affiliates, but it's also on in the middle of the night on the West Coast, right? So you Steelers fans, it's 3:14 in California right now, 3:14 a.m. So when I am on the West Coast, I get up really early. So I did the show yesterday and then puttered around, talked to the fetching Mrs. Hewitt, had a couple of cups of coffee to rejuvenate myself, jumped in the car and drove to LA Skid Row where I hadn't been in 20 years. Now, I did television in Los Angeles, nightly news, from 1992 to 2002. Sometimes on 3 days a week, sometimes 4, sometimes 5. It was called Life and Times. It's before cable. It was live television news every night, news and public affairs on PBS, KCET Channel 28. Won 3 Emmys for that show, along with Pat Morrison and Ruben Martinez and my dear friend Kerman Maddox. They're all dear friends. And the late, great Martin Burns, Saul Gonzalez. We had a great team. We covered it. So I would go down to Skid Row occasionally. And it was a tough place in the 90s, especially after the riots. But after the riots, everything was burned down. All of LA was a disaster. And nothing really stood out as particularly disastrous. And so I think I last covered it probably in 2001 before 9/11. And then I moved the radio show from the morning to the afternoon for many years until Bill Bennett retired. And then I moved back east to take the morning drive, because morning drive is where it's happening. That's where you get the most ears, and the show gets the greatest number of advertisers and the best guests. And so I wanted morning drive over afternoon drive, which I had on the West Coast. So I moved east. Fetching Mrs. Hewitt is a very considerate person. I haven't been to Skid Row in 20 years. It is a zombie apocalypse. I have never seen, I have been in the slums of Brazil, the favelas. I have been in the slums of the Dominican Republic, the slums of Phnom Penh. I have been through Vietnam, terrible places in Thailand, terrible places, harsh places. Nothing is as grim as Skid Row in Los Angeles, 2021. 50 square blocks of misery. And unlike the Dominican Republic or the other places that Food for the Poor works, There isn't even any hope. There's no hope. There's just addiction and mental illness and grinding poverty. And I'll tell you a little bit more on the other side. But if the court doesn't act, and I'm not sure that they have the authority to act, the big constitutional question, which is why I'm interested, nobody will. From the dystopian nightmare of Skid Row yesterday, where the progressive dream is unfolded over a century, and it's a nightmare. The amazing thing, and I'm not going to spend the whole show on this. I got to think about it and write about it. It's a constitutional issue of first impression, whether a court can use structural equitable remedies to take over where a city and a county have so manifestly failed. But the thing that really struck me, I want to drive home. Government cannot solve complex problems. It can't. They have more government agencies working on homelessness and more initiatives than there are cars on the road next to you if you are driving downtown in Atlanta right now. They've got a joint powers authority. They call it a JPA, the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority. The nickname is LASA. This JPA, this Joint Powers Authority, has no authority. It's like, I expected to hear the plan and all the glorious things that were going on to try and keep this federal court away. They don't even have a fig leaf. You know, I expected a bunch of fig leaves. They haven't got one fig. They're basically throwing up their hands and said, we don't know what to do. We're overwhelmed. 66,000 people. 1,383 homeless people died in L.A. last year. Exposure, cardiac arrest, overdose. 10% of them get hit by cars. And I got lost, of course, because I'm this will shock Dwayne. So, Dwayne, you take the 5 and you get off at 7th Street. It's a left-hand exit. And you drive down to...
I know exactly where that's at.
Yeah.
I was there 2 weeks ago.
So you drive down there, and I had been given the wrong address of the Union Rescue Mission. So I drove around for 45 minutes Skid Row.
That's not where you want to be lost.
Well, it's 7:30 in the morning. Everybody's just dazed and confused, and the streets are empty, so you can go pretty slow looking for... I finally pulled into the Midnight Mission, which is another rescue mission, and they told me where the Union Mission was, so I finally got there and parked. But the advantage of driving around in circles for 45 minutes is it's so appalling. I can't even describe to you, no pictures can adequately convey to you that 50 square blocks is a lot. It's by design, all right? So the city set it up in the 1890s for single men who were working on the railroad and drunk. And so it is by design. And I think there might be a constitutional issue in designing a place like this. And it's where LA and California and basically the country send people to die. So 1,383 people died last year. In January, 165 homeless people died in LA. So imagine a serial killer killing 5 to 6 people a day in LA. What do you think the media would do with that? Serial killer walking around killing 5 or 6 people. When we had the Hillside Strangler and then people freaked out. There's a movie about it now. Or any of the Zodiac killers, David Berkowitz, people freak out. One every 3 or 4 weeks. 5 people a day dying in LA in January. Exposure, drugs. On the street, though, lots more people are dying, but COVID is now running through this. I had double masks up. Everybody was masked, but, who knows who got COVID yesterday. Judge Carter kept a very clean and safe social distancing, and you don't want to mess with Judge Carter. But I'm here to tell you, government cannot solve this because the dysfunction of government at the micro level reflects the inability at the macro level to do anything except blunt force object. They can break things. That's what armies, navies, air forces, space forces, and special forces do. They can kill things and break things. And the police, because government can only do 2 things. They can arrest you and they can spend money. That's all they can do. And if they were to take all the money in LA that they try to spend on homeless people and give it to the Union Rescue Mission and the Salvation Army, the problem would get fixed. And there's an organization called SHARE, and there are a couple other the organization would get fixed. But if you want to know where the rage that fuels Black Lives Matter come from, at least a half, and probably more like 60% of the residents of this area are black women and the rape level is off the charts, and the assault level is higher, and it is just the worst thing I've ever seen. And so, look, they don't have the right answers. I haven't got the right answers, but I know one thing. Local government is never going to come up with the right answers. Not in L.A., not with that government, city or county.